Welcome everyone. I am Margaret Horlander and I will be your bourbon guide on today's journey, teaching you how to taste bourbon. So excited to have you join me today. It's going to be a lot of fun. A few housekeeping items before we start. You should have received your tasting mat, which you're going to need with you because it's going to give you a lot of good tips as far as, it'll be your cheat sheet, put it that way, for what I'm going to be doing today. It's also going to help you understand more about where the flavors come from because it's going to walk you through the different parts of the barrel. Also, you will need a glass. And this is a bring your own bourbon tasting, so I want to make sure that everyone has their own favorite bourbon with them. And even if you don't have a bourbon, just play along. It'll be fun. What we're going to do today is I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what bourbon is and what it isn't. We're going to learn a little bit about why Kentucky is the birthplace and the home of all bourbon. We're going to explore the magic of water with bourbon, and it is magic. I've got a little test for you all. So trust me on that. And then we're going to talk a little bit about food and bourbon and how that all comes together. So let's just start. Let's drink. First of all, what bourbon is. Now, we have a saying that all whiskeys are not bourbon, but all bourbon are whiskeys. And that is because bourbon must be 51% corn. Bourbon also must go into an unused, charred white oak barrel. Very important. Unused, charred, white oak barrel. Bourbon goes into the bottle at no less than 80 proof. And we're going to talk about proof in just a little bit. Bourbon also has no additives. It is water, it's grain, it is corn and yeast. And that's it in the barrel. Now, you'll notice I didn't say anything about water other than that's what goes in the barrel. It is not Kentucky water that makes bourbon bourbon. It's Kentucky water that makes it better, but it doesn't make it bourbon. Bourbon can be made anywhere in the United States. That was put into law in 1964, and bourbon is made all over the United States. But we think that we make the best bourbon here, and we know we make more bourbon than anybody else. As a matter of fact, we have per capita 2 barrels of bourbon that are in storage for every person in the state. So we each, it's our birthright. We each get 2 barrels of bourbon. So in 2 years, you must come back. We've got lots to share with you, and we love to share bourbon. So that's what defines bourbon. Now, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about bourbon. I have pre-poured mine today. What we're going to do when we look at bourbon is we're going to look at the color. We are going to nose it. We're going to taste it. And then we're going to swallow it and do the finish. All right. Bourbon, because it gets its color from being in the barrels are charred for a reason. It gives us taste and it gives us the color. But bourbon is an amber color. And if you look at this, I'm drinking today Bullet, which is made right here in Kentucky. And a little aside, people often ask me what my favorite bourbon is, and I always tell them the same thing. Whatever is in my glass is my favorite bourbon. Today, my favorite bourbon is Bullet. Bullet is a little bit of a straw color, but it's still in that amber category. You're going to see some bourbons, the longer they're in the barrel, they're going to get darker, and they may be more of a deep caramel. Some may be a little bit lighter. But that is the color. Sometimes we look at the legs. If you swirl it around in the glass and you see what's running down the sides, that's a viscosity. It shows kind of what the mouthfeel is going to be like. Not necessarily a thickness. It's like a viscosity. Then we're going to just swirl it and see how beautiful it is. Now, when you nose it, now we're on to part 2. You have probably tasted wine before, and you know a lot of people, when they drink wine, they take their nose and they get that down in the glass and they're taking up all the cherries and all the grapes. If you do that with bourbon, you're going to burn your nostrils. So let's go back to when I said 80 proof earlier, that it goes into the bottle at 80 proof. 80 proof, if you take the proof and divide it by 2, you get what is called the alcohol by volume, and that is the alcohol amount. okay? And it's usually like with Bullet, it's right over here on the side. It's a 45% alcohol by volume. So that means in this bottle's 45% alcohol. That's why you don't take your nose and take it deep down into the glass. Particularly if you have a very high proof, you will see stars. So you don't need to go that deep in order to really be able to taste it. What I want you to do is just very lightly and smell on each side of your nose. And that's another thing. I'm going to give you cocktail tips. You're just going to wow your friends. You're going to have so much trivia. But when your nostril, one side will work harder than the other on any given day. And we live in Kentucky, which is allergy season. So we're lucky if any of them work on any given day in the spring. Luckily, I think my right side is working some more. So you may just take a smell and see what you're smelling. Now, that's the other important part is there's no right or wrong answer. The distillers spend a lot of time making sure that there are tastes there that give this good flavor, but whatever you taste, it's not necessarily right, it's not necessarily wrong, it's just what your nose is tasting for that time. And don't be too alarmed if you're going, I smell nothing, because this does take a while to kind of get used to, but if you keep your mouth open, when you smell, you're activating your taste buds, which are all connected to your olfactory. So that helps elevate it. So take a little smell and see. Now with the Bullet, I get a lot of cinnamon in this. It's kind of sweet. There's some vanilla, a little bit of caramel, and those are typical flavors in a bourbon because of the barrel, which we'll talk about in our next session. But after you smell, what I want you to do is put it in your mouth. And this is where a lot of the magic happens. So we're not tossing it back. This is not, belly up to the bar. You want to taste a little bit, roll it around on your tongue, and even kind of chew it, because as you chew on the bourbon, you'll release a lot of those flavors. So notice the mouthfeel. Notice, is it kind of a thick mouthfeel? And what am I feeling? You might notice some peppery notes on the back of your tongue. It might feel a little spicy. Those are the taste buds that pick up spice. This bourbon that I'm drinking today, the rye, the Bullet has a lot of rye. So the back of your taste buds are really working for me. And then when you swallow, this is really important, because I know there's people out there who are saying, when I drink bourbon and it burns and I just can't do it, it burns. Well, we don't call that a burn. We call that a Kentucky hug. And, we're huggers in Kentucky, so it's going to burn. But for those of you who aren't used to this, when you swallow, open your mouth and blow out just a little bit. It's kind of counterintuitive, because usually when you taste and if you feel that burn, you want to close your mouth and then you start to cough. What I want you to do is swallow it and then blow out. So let's give it a taste. And I nose it. So I don't have any feedback right now, but I will tell you this. When I was nosing this earlier, I think I mentioned cinnamon, some vanilla. On the taste, I get a lot of nuttiness. I'm getting some pecan, some grain is in there. And then on the finish is long and it's spicy and it starts getting a little chocolatey, which is why we love Bullet. So, because you can never have enough bourbon, let's do it one more time. So let's do a little nosing. Hopefully it's becoming a little easier. And then a taste. It's just wonderful. It's why we love bourbon here. So the next time we get together, we're going to talk about water. And the water is going to come into effect with how we can maybe lessen our hug a little bit, as well as the other parts of the barrel and how they really impact the flavor of bourbon. So until next time, cheers.